Dutton Ranch just wrapped its first season in a way that almost nobody saw coming, and honestly, it did something that very few shows managed to pull off on a debut run. It didn't just tell a complete story, it blew the door wide open for something even bigger, and I don't say that lightly, because when you stack it up against Yellowstone, the show that built this entire universe, Dutton Ranch is already showing the bones of something that could run just as deep and hit just as hard over time. The way the finale landed, with threads left deliberately dangling, characters pushed to breaking points, and the foundation shifted underneath everything we thought we understood about these people. It made one thing crystal clear. This story is just getting started. Carter being taken by Mariano, Beth and Rip being forced into a corner where the only real option is to go on the offensive, and then Rob Will being killed by his own brother, his own blood, in what was one of the most gut-punch moments of the entire season. The finale didn't just close a chapter, it reloaded the gun and pointed it directly at Season 2. So what actually comes next? What can we piece together from everything that's been officially announced, and where does the story logically go based on how Season 1 was built? That's exactly what we're getting into today. This is Dutton Ranch Season 2. Theories explained and everything we currently know. And just before we get into it, there will be spoilers throughout this entire video. If you haven't finished Season 1 yet, go do that, come back, and we'll be right here waiting. Let's start with the character that is almost certainly going to reshape the direction of the entire show going into Season 2, and that's Casey Dutton. Here's the situation. Carter has been taken by Mariano and is being used as leverage, a direct pressure point designed to force the Duttons out of the picture entirely. The problem for Beth and Rip is that they have no trail to follow, no contact they can trust, and no obvious way to even begin locating where Carter's being held. The sheriff, Wade, is compromised. His connection to the Jacksons and the fact that he's sitting firmly inside that pocket of influence makes him less than useless in this situation. They cannot go to him. So the question becomes, where do they turn? We heard Beth in that finale moment, raw and absolutely direct, making it clear that they were going after them. Rip laying out the reality that Mariano didn't actually want Carter, he wanted Beth and Rip themselves. And Beth's response being exactly what you'd expect from her. They're going on offense, but to do that effectively, against an operation with the reach and resources that Mariano's crew has demonstrated, they're going to need something more than just two people willing to fight. They need someone with the specific kind of expertise that turns a desperate situation into a calculated one. Which is exactly where Casey Dutton comes in. Casey, Beth's brother, is a former Navy SEAL. That background isn't decorative, that's a character with the training to locate someone being held against their will, to move through dangerous environments, to operate in the exact kind of situation that Beth and Rip are walking into. And beyond the practical angle, bringing Casey into this show solves something on a larger storytelling level too. The earlier Yellowstone adjacent project focused on the Montana Marshals didn't quite connect with audiences the way everyone had hoped. Bringing Casey over to Dutton Ranch gives his arc somewhere meaningful to go. The legacy of that original Yellowstone universe continues through a show that's already demonstrating it can carry that weight. Now here's what I think is equally important about where Carter's story goes. Not just who saves him, but what saving him does to him. Because let's be honest about what Carter was doing throughout Season 1. He was pushing everyone away. He didn't want to be seen as belonging to anybody. He had this resistance to letting Beth and Rip in, this refusal to accept what was being offered to him, and that posture, that running from the people genuinely trying to protect him, is directly what landed him in the hands of Mariano. I don't think Carter dies in Season 2. I think the opposite happens. I think being taken, being genuinely helpless, being in a situation where the only people who come for him are the exact people he spent a season pushing away, that breaks something open in him, in the best possible way. He comes out the other side understanding something about family and loyalty and what it actually means to let people in. The toughness that Rip carries, the kind that comes from surviving things and choosing to stay. I think Carter starts developing that, and the people who rescue him become the reason he finally stops running. Now, before we go any further, if you've been following the Yellowstone universe on this channel, you know the kind of depth we go into on these breakdowns. And here's the reality. The people who actually catch everything when Season 2 hits are the ones subscribed right now, before the noise of a new season takes over. When trailers land and episode breakdowns start coming out weekly, The algorithm doesn't surface this stuff the same way for everyone. A subscription is the one thing that guarantees you're in the room when it matters. If this analysis is useful to you, that's your move. Moving on. One storyline from Season 1 that feels like genuinely unfinished business is the death of Wes. It happened right at the top of the season in the first episode, and the weight of it was immediately felt through Whitney, Wes's wife, who was then systematically intimidated and scared out of her home by the Jacksons. That's not a setup that gets abandoned. That's a foundation being laid. Here's where it gets interesting heading into Season 2. Hayne went to Sheriff Wade with the intent of pinning Wes's death on Rob Will. That plan made sense when Rob Will was alive. With Rob Will now dead, killed by his own brother, that particular path closes. But the weapon doesn't disappear. It was left with Sheriff Wade during the penultimate episode, and that detail is too deliberate to be throwaway. Weapons in shows like this don't get handed to compromised law enforcement unless the writers intend to bring them back around. And here's the thread that makes this genuinely dangerous for Rip specifically. He was holding that weapon in the first episode of the season, right after disarming Rob Will. His fingerprints could still be on it. Wade has the weapon, Wade is in the Jacksons' pocket. And Bueller, who has every reason to want Beth and Rip to suffer after what happened to Rob Will, knows that Rip buried something on that property. She heard him say it. She knows. So what does Bueller do with that information? She's lost her son. She's watching everything she built start to fracture. I think she goes to Wade. I think she pushes for Rip to be the one who carries the weight of what happened to Wes, manufactured or not, because she needs someone to blame and she has the tools to make it stick. The weapon left with Wade was not a small detail. It's going to matter in Season 2. Then there's Oriana. This storyline is the one I find most emotionally complex going into the next season, because it doesn't resolve cleanly in any direction. She's carrying Carter's baby. She had been planning to run with him. That was the plan. That was what the finale was building toward for both of them. And then everything collapsed. Her father's death changed the entire landscape for her in an instant. I think grief does something specific to Oriana. It doesn't make her harder or more calculating the way it might with Bueller. I think it pulls her inward, and I think it pulls her toward her grandmother in a way that distance between them has prevented until now. There's something about shared loss that can break through walls that years of normal life couldn't touch. And Oriana being pregnant with Carter's child puts her in an impossible position. She's the bridge between two families that are moving further apart by the episode. Bueller, fresh off losing Rob Will, may not have any interest in extending warmth toward anything connected to Beth and Rip's world. Carter is connected to them. Oriana carrying Carter's child puts her caught right in the middle. That pressure is going to define her arc in a major way next season. Now, Hayne being found out. There was a moment in the finale that I've been thinking about since it aired, when Oriana discovered her father's body. In the chaos and the shock of that moment, there was a visual beat, a glimpse of a car pulling away. The framing of that shot was deliberate. It wasn't incidental. I think Oriana caught enough of that to know, or at least to suspect strongly, that it was Hayne who did it. So now the question is what she does with that knowledge. Does she move toward revenge? Bueller spent years specifically trying to make sure Oriana didn't end up becoming her. Didn't become someone who answered violence with violence and carried that weight forever. But knowing that your uncle killed your father is a different kind of weight. That's personal in a way that changes people at their core. Or Oriana tells Poyer. And if that happens, what was already a fractured family dynamic inside the Temple Ranch becomes a complete civil war. Two sides clearly drawn, with Mariano still wanting Hayne to take over operations and run the ranch the way the transportation pipeline requires. Hayne sitting in his mother's chair, everyone around him knowing what he did. That's a powder keg I genuinely cannot wait to watch ignite. There's also the thread around Azir that I don't think the show is finished pulling on. Everything built around him in Season 1. The happiness, the baby on the way, the sense that he was finally getting the life he'd been working toward reads less like a payoff and more like setup for something falling apart. Building that crib before the baby arrives is the kind of detail writers use to signal exactly that. It's too neat, too hopeful, too deliberately arranged. I think Season 2 brings something that undoes all of it. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. Alright. Let's get into what we actually know officially about Season 2. The renewal was confirmed back in June, and if you were paying attention to the premiere numbers, that confirmation wasn't a surprise. The first episode of Dutton Ranch set the record for the highest viewership ever for a Paramount Plus premiere. That's not a number you walk away from. That's a number you build on. The network greenlit Season 2, and the show is coming back. On timing, most streaming shows right now operate on roughly an 18-month cycle between seasons. Apply that to Dutton Ranch, and Season 2 lands somewhere around the end of 2027. That does feel like a long wait, but Taylor Sheridan, who built this entire world and drives the creative engine behind it, has historically moved faster than the industry average. His shows have had quicker turnarounds than most. I wouldn't be shocked if we see Dutton Ranch back closer to the 12-month mark. I'm hoping for that. The story is too alive to sit for 2 years. One thing I'd love to see the production commit to is a longer episode count. Season 1 ran 9 episodes. Given everything on the table now, the operation in Mexico potentially opening up, the Hain power structure at Temple Ranch, Casey entering the picture, Carter's arc, Oriana's pregnancy, the Wes investigation resurfacing, 9 episodes isn't enough room for all of that to breathe properly. 10 at minimum. The scale of what Season 2 needs to accomplish demands it. In terms of who comes back, the core of the show is intact. Rip, Beth, Carter, Everett, Bueller, Oriana, Hain, Mariana, Azul, Zachariah, Austin, Miguel, and Sheriff Wade are all expected to return. Rob Will's death may not even be the last we see of that character. If the show revisits the altercation between the brothers in flashback, it would add a layer of context to Hain's motivations that Season 1 didn't fully explore. That's something I genuinely welcome. Dwight isn't coming back. That door is closed. The characters I'm most eager to see added are Casey, who has a real narrative home here, and deeper players from within Mariano's broader operation. The Mexico side of this has only been glimpsed. Season 2 needs to pull that into the light. Here's the thing about Dutton Ranch that I think gets overlooked. It came into an almost impossible position. A spin-off of Yellowstone, one of the most watched dramas in recent American television history. The expectations were enormous, and rather than try to replicate what Yellowstone did, Dutton Ranch carved out its own identity, its own geography, its own family dynamics, its own stakes. Season 1 did something most spin-offs don't manage. It made you care about new people. That's the hardest thing to do in television. And they did it. Season 2 has massive potential. The pieces are in place, the conflicts are real. And now we watch it escalate. Last thing before you go. If this breakdown gave you something you hadn't connected before, a theory you're now running with going into the wait, the people who are going to be here when the first trailers drop, when casting news breaks, when the premiere date gets announced, are the ones already subscribed. Every piece of Dutton Ranch coverage going forward lands on this channel. If missing, that would genuinely bother you, you already know what to do. Season 2 of Dutton Ranch is coming. And when it does, it's going to hit.